Hi, everybody. This is Amy Levesque. I'm the Executive Director of Inclusive Theater of Western New York. And this is our inaugural Saturday night where we are going to be discussing aspects of inclusion in the arts. Tonight we have with us Quentin Gray, who is an actor, Dallas Taylor, who's an artistic director of inclusive theater, Christopher Wiley and his beautiful wife, Janelle, who are double trouble, Jessica Levesque, don't know who she is, Kat, who is also an incredible actress, as is Queen Robinson at the bottom. So really quickly, we're here for this hour, the next hour, to talk about, particularly this week, just inclusion in the arts and how things have changed since the pandemic has come into our lives, and how we are looking at accessibility in different ways, and new and exciting ways in some cases, but also in some also frustrating ways. So we're glad that you're joining us, whether it's coming on now or viewing a recording later, and we hope that you will leave us some feedback and let us know what you think. So without further ado, I will turn over the floor to our actors, and hopefully they will give us some insight into inclusion in the arts.
Is anybody going to start?
Oh,
Our first time. So anybody listening to this, I listened to Brene Brown has a new podcast, and she talked about that. She has 3 out right now, and she referred to it as FFT. And I'll leave you to figure out what the first F is for, but the second part is first time. So F blank 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 first time.
But it was only 2 seconds, so it wasn't terrible. So since you're starting first, why don't you set the tone for the night?
You know, I'll tell you what, Amy. I've thought a lot about this, and I thought about the way that we were introduced from a mutual friend of ours, also named Amy, by the way, but that's another story. I had always wanted to do or try acting. I'm not particularly good at it. I'm okay, but I'm new, you know. But I always wanted. I wanted to try it. I speak for a living. I'm a pastor, vocationally United Methodist pastor, and so when one of the things that kept me from trying it sooner, though, was access to stages. So when you think about inclusivity, it's making spaces accessible to others beside people in the disabled community. So I was excluded because I couldn't get on a stage. So when I heard about what we do here at Inclusive for the first time, I thought, hey, that sounds pretty good. And I came down and I saw your play from a couple times back, and I thought, this is pretty neat, but I want to see more representation of people who look like me, but I can't really say that if I wasn't willing to kind of jump in. But the one thing about all of this is when we looked at spaces for performance and things like that, we made sure they were accessible. When people needed accommodations, we made sure that they were made so that it could be accessible. And that's so important because so often in the arts and all over in our society, some people like me are left behind. And so when I think about inclusion in the arts, I think about exactly that, just making the space for people like me to be included. Because for me, that's how I define disability. I'll kind of wrap up with that and say that when I think about disability, it's living in a world not created to include me, but here this space is created to include me. So I'm grateful for that. And like I said, that's what I think about.
Well, and interesting, and that play was our inaugural full length, and that was done at a theater in Buffalo, and it was called "And Where Will You Put the Things You Save?" And it starred Jessica, Steve Brockman, and John Profeta. And an interesting piece is that one of the actors in that play is a person with a disability. He's in a wheelchair. He's a lawyer. His disability came later, um, but the physical space at that particular venue was not accessible. So the actor who played the role was not and could not be in a wheelchair because he wouldn't have been able to get on stage. So I'd love to run that play at some point again in an accessible venue. I mean, we appreciated the opportunity to do these things. And I'll jump to Jess for her role in that. We want to be able to provide these opportunities for people who have different needs, right? Because really what's disabled is not the person, it's the environment.
Mhm.
And I firmly believe that our world is not constructed in such a way to be accommodating to everyone. But what I'd like to see is this play redone where we do in fact have that accessibility and a person in a wheelchair plays the role of the person in the wheelchair. Jessica, who played one of the leading roles in that show, played Erica, who is a person with autism, right? And Jessica, how did you feel playing somebody with autism?
It seemed like Erica was more a little bit on the severe side, but I didn't really have to do, well, I had to do a lot of my studies to know what her constructive thinking was, because there was a lot of things that she was going through. And for her being a roller derby girl, no less, I can understand of what she went through, similar segregation that had happened at roller derby and stuff, because they were excluding her from all these roller derby events and she wasn't drafted.
And there's something else that you and Erica have in common, right? What is that?
Just the autism part?
You
Is that
both
what
have
you mean?
autism, right? So that was
Yeah.
one of the important pieces, even for the playwright, Baroness von Smith. She wanted that role played by someone with the same disability. And when we can do that, we want to do that. But we also want to push that envelope. And we'll talk a little bit as we go on about some of the other projects we've done, especially Midsummer Night's Dream, where the actors were not necessarily written as people with disabilities, but who then became folks with disabilities, casted, and that tossed both non and disabled persons together in a setting that is not typically done. So not to get too far ahead of where we're at. But so, kudos to bringing up that point. I think it's really important that we talk about these accessible spaces, but also to kind of jump back a little bit and, knowing if we were staging that show now, what does that mean with what's happening around us, right? Like what is going on that has changed in our world that now accessibility is first and foremost on everybody's lips, and anybody can take that. I'm going to stop talking because they don't want to hear me all night.
Oh, can you repeat what you said again?
Okay, so well, for example, typically I'm hearing about people who are from underrepresented groups. So whether that's a person of color, a person who is poor, a person who is disabled, lacking access to certain things, okay? And now that we have this pandemic, suddenly access is happening everywhere. And these groups of people have been told forever that accommodation can't be made. And we have to talk about, like, what's happening here and why is it okay now? Or is it okay now? This is going to forever change who we are as a community, as a company. This is our quote new normal, right? But why do you guys think it was such an easy task, or is it, to get everybody accessibility now when 3 weeks ago we couldn't do it? I mean, there's somebody online, I was reading a story the other day, they said, I had to quit college. They told me I could not have a schedule that didn't match the professors, even though I'm physically ill. And this person quit college, unfortunately, but had she waited 3 more weeks, it would have been accommodated. So
I don't know. I think that you don't understand what you don't understand. You know what I mean? And like even for me, I wasn't a full-time wheelchair user until about 5 years ago, and I didn't notice. I don't think. I mean, and I've been a disability advocate for a lot longer than that. But I didn't notice how inaccessible the world was as far as stairs and things like that until it was me. So now I think other people will see things that we in the disabled community have witnessed, and even people much longer than me that have understood life for a long time. And so I guess that's really what my hope is. I mean, sooner or later we're gonna be back in front of people, and we're gonna be doing plays. I mean, we might do something here or something virtually, but eventually we're going to be back on stages and things like that. And I think that's the hope going forward is going to be that let's not forget that when the world needed to be more accessible, it became that way. So now that everybody was able to be at the table, let's make sure that still happens when we get back out into public life again. For me, that really is what a lot of it comes down to. But I think it's just a matter of awareness.
Amy, I'll also throw out there from my perspective, because I've worked from home full time for a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And what I found even in my previous jobs, and even working with people with disabilities and with Chris and I, a lot of people are scared of the unknown. And those accessibilities of going online are unknown, and people are scared of it. And all of a sudden, they're so forced to do it that they don't have a choice. They're biting the bullet, even if they're kicking and screaming, and realizing that, hey, we really can do this. And I think people are becoming more aware of, hey, maybe we could have done this in the past. But I think there's a fear factor there that we've dealt with in the past.
Change of sort of a mindset now. So now that sort of everyone is locked up in their houses, they can't go out anymore. So, and we're all like 45. The president said we're all fighting the same enemy now. So now that we're all sort of unified as we're all human now. So we all have the same enemy. So we're fighting something together. So now we're seeing each other equally now. Do you think that there's some of that involved too? So now it doesn't matter what your skin color is, whether you're in a wheelchair or not, or whether you're whatever it is, we're all together. We're all in this together now. So we see you as someone that's a part of humanity, I guess. Do you think that has something to do with it also?
I hope that's true. I think it is. I hope that it's true. I hope it stays that way.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because I feel like that's also a part of it now that people see that, all right, everyone is going through their own sort of thing, their own different sort of thing, but at this very moment we're all going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that translates to when this is over and done with and we go back to our normal lives, that we can still have that same mindset. And also maybe the fact that we all got through this together. So let's try to go through our normal lives together also.
Can I add one thing to that, though, that I think is super important? I hope that it doesn't become a means of erasure, kind of like all lives matter. I mean, of course that's true, but I hope that it really becomes, to use the name of our company here, inclusive, that it becomes a way of broadening the umbrella so that everybody, again, is able to be included, and not a way of saying, well, of course, everyone, matters. We're all the same, because we have differences too, but we want to make a space that includes those differences as part of our collective.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes things get watered down. And also, to speak to what you said, I hope it is the case, although we're already seeing some kickback to our Asian Americans, brothers and sisters, right? Like it seems like we always have to have a group that is like the person that's in the blamed person. I don't know, for lack of a better thing. Like, even now we know we have to be united in this fight. We have to. This is how we get through it. Um, but there's still so much divisiveness. You know, I am hopeful as you are, Chris, that this changes things. I truly am. And we know that even doing our small part, it does. We know it makes a difference. But I do hope that if we learn anything from this is that, inclusion is important. It works. And when we do that, we're opening up the world to some really amazing, talented people. We saw that. I mean, to go back to our Shakespearean play, people thought we were crazy pulling that off. And I think sometimes we did too. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was probably one of our most challenging plays, but, everybody got out there and did it. And every show sold out. People were hearing about the work we were doing. You guys should really, pat yourself on the back because it was a big deal. And we don't talk about that. And we have Shakespeare slated, if once we're back on stage again. We'll be doing this as a regular production as part of our season, and that's really cool. So I think for me, I think it's kind of neat that the world is finally seeing what we've seen for a while. We knew all this was possible, and that's super cool. But just think now with more awareness, it will, I think, improve, hopefully.
Maybe one of the things I'm concerned about, though, with all of this is just like we see now, people who do show an interest suddenly think that they're an expert and can tell everybody what to do and not listen to the person with the disability or non-disability and what they need and their needs, then just say, oh, everybody's done it with Zoom, so you can do Zoom, and not look at the full need. So I think that's one of the things we still have to be aware of and still be advocates for through this whole process, because a computer and Zoom's not going to fix it for everybody.
No, and that's a really important point. And, before all this was a thing, right? Like I would refer to those folks as colonizers, right? Like you come in and you're going to land on that land, and then you're going to tell everybody how to run that land the appropriate way, right? And I do think, because I've seen it with some meeting groups now, that it's happening. Others that are just doing it and calling it inclusive because anybody can access it, and we know that's not the true definition of inclusion. So to your point, I think that's really important, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that.
I think, for me, that's what comes back to, listening to other people's experience and letting them speak, for themselves, giving them space to be represented. I mean, I'm a wheelchair user, so I can't get upstairs. I don't have, however, like sensory issues or anything like that. Or I'm a middle-aged white guy, but I can't, I can't speak for a person of color and say, I know your experience. There's no way for me to know the experience. So what I need to do is make sure that people who are beyond my own personal experience, I need to make sure, especially when I have privilege, to make sure that they have the space that they can be part too. That's, to me, that's what inclusion is. And that's the difference between, oh, everybody's together and, oh, everybody's together, but we also welcome our differences, that those two things kind of meet at some point. Anyone else?
Well, I was going to say, let's
think
talk
that's
about
a good
productions,
point.
right? Like, go ahead, Dallas. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that that's a good point, that like we all should be together, but we all should accept each other's differences, because that's the reality of things.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't change the fact that, you know, we can all accomplish something together, because our differences can bring something different to the table. Like you can bring your experiences to the table, I can bring mine to the table, and we can essentially we can solve the same problem using our own different opinions, different experiences. So that's also very a good point. There's something that I hope that we can also realize as we're all locked up together
Yeah.
in a way.
No, and
And
that's a super point, because our differences are what make us beautiful, right? Like if we all were the same and looked the same and did the same and had the same life experiences, it would be so boring. Everything would be the same all the time. And I think this diversity piece, which I think that, Inclusive has been pretty good about too, is just kind of respecting this idea of difference and how important it is. We all don't agree on everything all the time. Sometimes we want to kill each other. We're backstage and it's 150 degrees out, and we've been reading Midsummer Night's Dream for 50 years. But at the end, that unification that comes is what's so beautiful, and that final product shows it.
I don't know what you mean, but anyway, I will say this though. To me, I totally get it, because you go, if you stay in your silo, everything is sort of the same, and it's cool, but here, like say with Inclusive, there's just more, because we're more diverse with disabilities, along with gender and color and all those other, and some other things too. Some of those things, to me, there's just more flavor, and it really, it makes it just, to me, so much cooler. And that's what I think we're missing if we don't have that.
And you learn more. Like you can't really learn being around people who are similar to you.
Yeah.
You're
Especially-
absolutely right about that, Dallas. You can't learn. How did you say it? You can't learn by.
You can't really learn by being around people who are similar to you. So like I feel like the Midsummer Night's Dream play, we had so many different people in there, and a lot of different people. And I think everyone sort of came out of it like it was a different experience for everybody. And we all sort of learned from it. I bet there were people who hadn't worked with someone in a wheelchair before, or hadn't worked with someone with autism before. So they had to sort of challenge themselves and sort of give themselves a little bit more patience, because it's a learning curve for everybody.
Well,
So I feel
even
like that
us
was
working on the script, right? Like
yeah.
we had to adapt a script so that everybody could participate. And at first, a few people were just like, "Can you do that?" Well, I'm like, "Well, Shakespeare's dead, so I don't think he's going to be mad." And it's public domain, right? But we knew, we couldn't give X person a 40-line, solo, because perhaps it would have been too hard for them to memorize. So what did we do? We were inventive. We would cut lines, or we would put them inside of books, or hide them on the back of something, right? So that concept, because we didn't know, I've been working in disabilities for 26 years now, and I don't profess to know anything. I know what I know, but every day something else is thrown back that challenges what I knew the first time. And that helps me grow as a person, but also I think as our company, we learned a lot. Like, holy crap, this is really hard to do when it's hot. Shakespeare's hard generally.
And even like the blocking, like positioning and stuff like that. Like
Yep.
being in a wheelchair, I can't move the way somebody who's not in a wheelchair moves. We need more space. I need to be able to turn. I need to be able to get on and off stage, and things like that. So again, it just makes you more aware.
With that awareness comes some really good challenges, though. When we were looking at not just the blocking, but also the costumes for fairies, making sure that wings wouldn't get caught in wheels, it was cool to learn how to do that, to make sure that it would be right for you and right for the setting still too.
Yeah.
So I
Plus,
think it's also taking what Sorry.
you know me, when we tried to do our own makeup, it was terrible. You did a much better job. So I'm grateful, but it is, you know, I'm glad you were there to be able to kind of help us go through that. It really made a difference.
It's a matter also, like what you were saying before, of learning from what people have to kind of like teach you where you are and how you can learn to be better from there. I'm sorry, I totally messed up how you said
No,
it.
we
You said
totally
it way
got what
better.
you, yes.
I
But
think
it's like I would never have thought about adapting things like that until I met you, and then it's like, oh, I have to. Obviously, this isn't going to be that hard, but I never would have thought to until it was brought up with you. So it's good
Yeah, but
challenges.
you became Mary Poppins. Anytime we needed anything, you would open a bag and it would just be there. And it would be
That's
like,
Shakespeare magic.
it was pure magic. It was pure magic.
I think also the other thing that we've done as a company too is not only learning from each other, but being willing to be open and sharing what we need. Because I think a lot of times we have so many people talking for us and thinking for us and assuming things that you kind of shut down and don't always remember that, hey, you can speak up and talk for yourself and advocate for yourself. And I think there's a lot of that going on, whether we know it or not, in this group.
Quentin, what do you think of being an actor with the company? Like, what are your thoughts on some of this stuff?
Well, I only can speak for myself. I don't know about any other experience, but when it comes to me and the company, I'm glad that it's you know inclusive, because it just gives like everybody opportunities, no matter what background or where you came from, whether you're a veteran or just new, or whether you barely acted at all. It just gives everybody equal opportunity. And that's something that theater companies, even in Buffalo, are still kind of struggling with right to this day, because it's kind of hard to break into the theater scene in Buffalo. Just believe you me. and the reason I'm pretty much grateful for inclusive theater, because it just get to grow in my craft, and just get better and have more opportunity. Not only that, it also helps me grow, beyond just acting. You give me opportunity to write and hopefully direct in the future. So it just helps me just grow overall as an artist in general. So for that, for that, my experience, it does like push me to what I can do and thought I can never do. Like, I never thought I would be able to do a Shakespeare play. I mean, sure, I do it through monologues, but I'm glad I had the opportunity. So now I know that I definitely can do Shakespeare. So that gives me confidence in the future, when I do, other plays by Shakespeare.
What about your experiences as a writer, Quentin? Because you got to see something you wrote come to life.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. When people just started going over my lines, that is just the weirdest thing I have ever heard. Because I'm just remember on the computer typing these lines. Okay, what are the characters gonna say next? Okay, this, and then weeks later, they're saying the same thing before. It's like wow, I just pulled down the wind.
It's pretty cool though, right?
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. I mean, to see how my idea kind of flourished. And the funny thing, I could just tell you. Do we have time about how I could just tell you the story?
Yes.
Well, I pretty much came up with that story when I was working at Mighty Taco, washing dishes. And I was just thinking to myself, oh, God, I hate this job. Why don't I just quit? And then I says, no, you need the money. Then I just thought to myself, wouldn't it be funny if that was just like a play or a movie? like to hold all your personalities, just talking to yourself. So that's kind of how the idea came about.
Well, and we all love Mighty Taco and Inclusive Theater, so.
Hey, Mike Taco, sponsor us. If you're watching this, sponsor us.
I like tacos.
Queen, how did you feel being, and Kat too, being in his play? I mean, he just saying, like, it just blew his mind that he got to see it come to life.
I think that it was absolutely awesome. The way that it was written was just so imaginative, and you just kind of, became that person. So I just thought it was a truly wonderful experience.
I think that it was a very, very strong play. Having so many different perceptions going on at the same time, it feels very natural for a lot of people. And being able to hear so much good argumentative in it, and then it got dark and light at the same time. It was a very, very strong play to do. It was challenging though, because we knew Quentin was right there and was ready to tell us if he thought we were doing it right or not. That was a good challenge though, I think.
Yeah, but I don't want to be like too judgmental, of the actors. I don't want to say, no, you're doing it wrong. No, because I kind of wrote it where I left it to the actors' interpretation of the characters. Like, if you feel like you should do it like this way, then I'm not going to fight against it, because I feel like because I'm also an actor too, because I like to give actors like freedom of how they should portray the characters.
So did we do you proud?
Oh yes, you did. Yeah, you did me proud.
I love that you let me play a guy in it. That was something I never thought I'd get an opportunity to. So it was really quite cool to do. And it was cool to be in your head that way. Whoop.
I'm gonna be honest. The instant I heard that, maybe like a good female playing the guy's role, I thought, oh, that would be hilarious. Let's do that. Yeah. Like I'm always welcome to new ideas or ideas I haven't thought of. So to me, I don't want to be like an egomaniac and saying, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to do it, and nobody change anything. It's like, no, I'll be able to admit that I may have flaws. So like before I submitted to the play to Amy, like I asked like a few friends, like I asked like Chris Sponcito, who also co-wrote it. He wrote all the logic scenes. Also, Queen, if you hate all the dialogue for logic, blame that guy. He wrote all the.
No, I loved it.
What
Yeah,
though?
just blame that guy. I didn't write those lines. He wrote it. And also, I gave it to like my brother, and also I submitted to Chris and Janelle. They read the play before I submitted it. Like even the last line, I had to credit to Janelle. When the last line of the play is what will people think of me then? That's what was Janelle. So give her a partial writing credit for that.
But you know what? To me, like, because one of the things for me, Quentin, you and I have had this conversation actually, that like if I wrote something, it would be really hard for me to let it go, to let other people do it. Like that's human nature, right? Like we want to think that we're in control, right? That we kind of have this way of doing it and that it's the right way and so on. And like if anything has come out of our present times with this virus and everything, I think people are realizing that we're not really in control at all. But more than that, like with what Quentin was just saying about the different people playing the different roles and where you're crossing genders and all those things, like that's the point, right? That's the point about inclusion, is that everybody can come, like, and be exactly who they are. And yet at the end of the day, it comes off, and it not only comes off, but it turns out to be awesome. And all we're doing is making the space for people to be exactly who they are, and kind of letting go of the reins a little bit, that like some other folks, sometimes, not some other folks, we do it too. I already confessed to doing it, that sometimes we want to hold on to. You just let it go and let people be who they are, and have their space in it. And it turns out to be this wonderful thing. And that's really is what I love about inclusive theater, is that, I've kind of made the reference to us being like the Wu-Tang Clan, but it really is, right? We're like this, we're this like gang of people all coming together to make this thing that isn't just one of us, but it's all of us. And that's really what it's about, right? And again, that's what I hope we take away after all the pandemics and everything else is gone, that we remember that, when we all kind of throw all our flavor into the mix, that it can be an amazing and wonderful and awesome thing.
Well, and a cool thing, well, first I will have to say, Quentin, like, I don't even know if you realize how competitive that playwright competition was. I think we got, and Dallas, correct me, I think we got either 25 or 30 submissions. It was the highest ever that we'd received, and they came from everybody in Western New York, and it wasn't picked because Quentin wrote it. It was picked because it was a really damn good script. And that's another important piece that we often find that's missing, is that people will put those who might not have access into a group of lesser than performance, lesser than submission, lesser than blah, blah, blah. And what we say is that anybody, when given the opportunity, can rise to meet even the highest threshold. You just have to let them meet it, for God's sake. Like, that's what, give people an opportunity to do that, which is what happened with Shakespeare and all of those other things. So, to your credit, Q, I mean, that was an excellent, excellent script. And, I can't imagine, not having selected it, because it was so powerful just in a read through. And I think that's super, super important. And then, just to say too, that we're just now touching, we haven't even by a long shot hit where we can go with this. This is why we pick topics that are challenging, like our stigma topic, because those were super heavy. I mean, Kat, I don't know how you acted that every night. Your play, Matt Boyle, who'll be here next week, your role was extraordinary. It was heavy. It was truth. But hitting these things, and who knows what the next shorts will be in terms of theme, but really picking these things that people tend to stay away from or don't want to talk about. Mental health issues, as we see now with the governor having a free line to get you to people that help you, are really important. So one of our roles is to talk about those things in a way that people will hopefully understand. But, to go back to Matt's play, I mean, I don't know. We would watch it every night and we'd be like, wow, that's hard. I don't know how you did it as an actor. I mean, kudos, because that was hard as hell.
That one was tough. Honestly, that one, and I even told Matt afterward, the only way that I could do it day after day was I kept thinking about everything that broke my heart over and over and over. Because it's the story of a woman who goes from being who's still madly in love with her husband, but really just is going through the worst moments of his life with him. So you go through every single sad emotion, you have every hurtful thing, because it's what's going on in the moment for the characters.
And the truth in it. I mean, you brought the truth out. It was powerful. It's powerful.
Thank you.
And, the failure of the sound. Sorry. That was also powerful. The one night where it wasn't the gun going off, it was somebody's cell phone interacting with the speaker. We're learning.
That's also the Shakespearean foil, really, where it creates something fun in between really serious moments.
Fair. It's fair.
I just want to give a to myself for being right on time with the lights in that play.
The timing was awesome. That was it. The acting and timing were great. The rest, not so much. Sorry.
For those who don't know, Dallas actually was doing our lights from backstage, reaching behind a shade to flick light switches that were about a yard away, and he was the only one who had long enough arms to do this. So many thanks will always go out to Dallas for being tall.
That was
Oh,
freaking impressive.
So we've got
Also wanna
about
go back-
18 minutes or so left. And I guess, it's kind of open forum. Like, what do you want to see personally, going forward, whether it's for inclusion, whether it's inclusive, whatever, what does the future of theater or the arts look like to you? And Dallas, you're excited. I'll let you go first.
I am. So I thought about this when Quentin was talking about his play, and I want to thank Quentin for letting me direct that one. I want to see sort of what we're doing now, but really, really pushing it. So like for example, I'm a quiet person, but deep down, I love anarchy. I love disruption. So having Quentin's play and having Kat play the role of a male, but also the role's name was masculine, like really having that kind of thing, like that's not supposed to, like having Christopher Wiley play a fairy in a Shakespeare play, but he's in a wheelchair. That's not supposed to happen. Just playing someone with autism who also a roller derby girl. That's not supposed to happen. I want to see just every I want the audience to feel every single emotion through every single play, like that shorts that we did with the Sigma, just having the audience go through everything through headspace, through page 2 to the one I forget the name of the play that Cat was in, but that one just have plays that just punch the people in the mouth so they walk out of there with no words to say. Like I want to see us in the news, everything, just chaos. Chaos.
Well, and that's the point in learning, right? Like that, there's studies out there that when you reach that point of discomfort is where you tend to learn the most, because you are paused and you are forced to think about it. And this is why, like, you've always been, Dallas, for those who didn't know it, was my student who didn't talk at all when I taught him, but now he doesn't stop talking. So this whole quiet thing, I don't believe anymore. But
Yeah.
this idea of having this discomfort and challenging a status quo, I think that is so important. And it's more than a stigma. It's more than, a disability. It's more than even a role. It's really challenging what people's perceptions are of the world around them. And most of them are wrong. We've learned incorrectly. The hilarity is, like, you see somebody in a movie and they roll up in a wheelchair and they're like, hello, I'm officer so and so, and they look at them like they're crazy. There are police officers who are in wheelchairs. Not an anomaly, that's our world. But we don't tend to see them. So I think bringing these kind of uncomfortable or different scenarios to people really does help them learn. And to your point, I think that's great. And I think, that is totally what I've seen for inclusive since the beginning, is always pushing that boundary.
And just that, looking at the screen right now, everything that inclusive is sort of brought together, like all these different people. And like Christopher was saying, that we're the Wu-Tang Clan, we're the gang, we're all together, we're pushing through, we're breaking barriers and all of that, and also busting out some sick rhymes in the process. I call being ODB in the Wu-Tang Clan.
If I may speak, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm extremely competitive. I want like inclusive theater to be one of the like biggest companies in theater companies in Buffalo, just so I feel like we could all like stick it to all the theater companies that reject us or didn't accept us. Like we're pretty much like the outsiders, the renegades, and just to push it further and build an audience, just so we could just so I could just, at least me personally, I could just stick it to the other theater companies. Like, see, you see what you missed? You could have had me. Now you. But
Here,
yeah.
here.
Name them, Quentin.
Yeah,
Name
but
them. Name them.
that's the competitive side of me coming out.
I entirely agree with Quentin. I was actually going to say that I really hope that we continue and grow in inclusivity and for all people, be they in wheelchairs, non-speaking. I have a hard time finding different theater companies to work with because I'm very heavy. Finding a place that everyone can go and actually have a place to be in theater as well as have it accessible to the masses is huge.
And
I
that's
think that
ridiculous because you are extraordinarily talented. And if somebody can't pick that up, we can. We love having, like, you're incredible. Everybody that, yeah, I mean, I don't say that lightly. I mean, that's their loss. And
Can I
certainly,
interject something?
Yeah.
Can I? Yeah, and this is what we promoted for inclusive theater because over the years, I know what it's like to be excluded. I have dealt with a lot of discrimination and a lot of segregation and stuff because they had told me that, oh, she's autistic, she could probably hurt somebody, or she can't know her lines because she would get too distracted because of her disability, she could be violent, all kinds of stuff. And this was the stigma that kept me back from wanting to do theater. And it was at that moment where I did try out a play. It wasn't inclusive yet. Inclusive wasn't born. So I took a chance. I did the play. And that's where Inclusive was born after, because we figured, like, why can't we do more plays like everybody else should? Like, it's not fair that, like, none of these other theater companies can accept you because they don't know what to do with you. And that's the stuff that we're trying to really push, is to get rid of that mindset of how, like, we got to step out of the box, or think outside the box, if you will, and try to really figure out if they really have a talent. It shouldn't really be about the look.
it definitely helps redefine beauty as well for a mass culture. You can find it in
Absolutely.
anyone and anything anywhere. And this really helps push that.
I just think that, again, it just adds so much more flavor that, like, other people are excluding when they say, well, you can't do this, or this person doesn't belong here, or whatever. I just keep thinking, like, with the Shakespeare, when Avery, one of our actors, Avery, had his speech, and he did it as a rap. And I remember thinking before I heard it, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to come off. And then he did it, and he lit it up, and and that's the point, I think, right? It may not look like what you expect. It may not sound like you expect. It might be something completely different, but it's still really awesome because we're all here putting our heart on the line, and we're in it. And just, again, it might not be what you expect, but it might also be better, and I think I see that when I see some of the things that we've done together. You wonder, how's this going to come off, and then you see it, and we're like, wow, this is really amazing. And we've heard that, it's not just like me saying that about my own work or our own work. I mean, we've heard that from people who have reviewed it too, and so I hope people will recognize that, begin to see that this space belongs not just to some of us, but to all of us, and that it can be a great thing.
and one of the things that I love, because I'm in a different position than you guys, because you're usually on stage, is I get to see your growth. I can remember the first time I met Q, and he walked in and he was so calm and, kind of quiet. And the next time he's on stage and he's turning it out and he's doing Midsummer Night's Dream and he's hilariously funny. Queen came in, same thing. I didn't know what to expect out of her. I had met her sister online. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, what am I watching here? Kat, same thing. Just watching the development of you guys as actors and also as theater professionals. You know, you're expanding what you're doing. You know, some of you start just doing, you know, maybe you're acting, and then like Q, you end up where you're writing a play, or Kat, who ends up did the entire staging and set design and then costuming for Midsummer Nights while she was acting in it. You know, so for me to see selfishly the growth is just amazing.
Can I?
But I also like the friendships that are forming as well. And I think, and I'll just go to Q before we talk a little more about that, but I think that's our biggest piece, is that we are maintaining and establishing lifelong respect and friendship.
Oh, well, I just want to interject. I have to say, on my first audition for Inclusive Theater has to be the funniest audition I ever been on. I could not stop. I cannot stop laughing at that script. And to this day, it's the funniest script I ever had. It was for the game show host for the Three Little Pigs.
Oh boy.
That today is the funniest play I ever been in. I
The
still,
tangerine.
and I was just quoting Janelle's line just earlier today, literally just earlier today. He's like, have you ever tried to catch those pig, those greasy little bastards always get away.
Oh my.
You know, can I just add one thing too? Well, it turned out to be our audition. Because on the way down, like when I was coming down to audition the first time that we ended up being, and I said, "Hey, Janelle, are you gonna do this too?" For those of you who don't know, I mean, everybody here knows, but if anybody's listening after, like Janelle and I are married, and we were on the way down, and I said, "Hey, Janelle, are you gonna audition too?" And she said, "Well, I wasn't really thinking about it, but I guess I will because I'm going to be there anyway if you're there." So I said, "Awesome, I think you should. I think it'll be fun." So we come in and we're doing the audition, and we happen to be obviously there at the same time. So Amy, you gave us both, you know, roles in the same scene, and people started commenting like, "Wow, those two really have some chemistry," or something. And I was like, we fooled them all, you know. And they let us in, but it was funny, you know, because you guys didn't really know us yet, you know. So, but it, you know, the chemistry was just obviously there, you know. But you know, I think we have some really talented actors. I think I'm sort of near the bottom of that list. But fortunately for me, Janelle also decided to participate, and so the chemistry was good. So, haha, suckers.
Queen, what? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I said, I think one thing too is we need to just keep pushing outside the box to make sure we're not setting ourselves up in a box, whatever that is, and make sure that we're pushing those boundaries, because it's very easy to get complacent and, okay, we're always going to do Shakespeare and we're going to do a comedy and we're going to do this and not, and you know, kind of get that stigma around ourselves. And I think we need to be careful of that.
And I'll tell you, that is the challenge with the 501c3, because the government wants it in a box.
Yep.
And you try to push back, and then somebody comes back and says, you can't do it that way. That's why it's taking us forever to finish it, because we start writing it and they're like, no, you can't do that. It's got to be like this. Successful theaters are doing this. To where I say, well, we're a successful theater. You know, we're totally there. We're just doing it different. And so I'm always having to push back on that stuff and know that we're also considering it too, because it's very easy. Just as, and I don't know how many of you folks have heard it, that people will call us a disability theater company. We are not that. We've never been that. We include people with disability.
I heard a few of my actor friends call it that. So
yeah, I mean, it is not that. We include people who are typically excluded from performing arts, period. It doesn't matter if you're disabled, if you're Black, if you're from another country, we don't care.
But it goes back to what you said earlier on, Amy, where you talked about, you know, I think it was you, well, somebody here anyway, about having roles for people regardless of disability, whatever body they are in. If they're good for the role, they're good for the role. And so that's where I take exception to people saying it's a disabled or a disability related theater company. We're a theater company.
Period.
We
Yep.
happen to have some folks, in our group that are disabled, but so what? It's because, we have a space here too, but it's not like the roles aren't really, some of them are, we've mentioned a few that were written for people with disabilities, but most of the roles that we're talking about are not specifically disabled roles. They're just roles that happen to have actors because we have enough talented actors that sometimes have disability. The actors have disabilities. So you're changing the dynamic, but I think it's important to keep that out front, that it's not just about being one thing or another thing. It's about inclusion of all the things.
And we will never put someone on stage simply because they have a disability. We're not about putting people up to sell tickets. Like, that's not what we do. The person who is on the stage is going to have exactly what they need, the support that they need to be successful on that stage. If they're not quite there yet, we can help get there through classes that we offer and other things that go on, but we will not simply put somebody up there just to say, hey, we have a cast of 14 disabled people in our show. I will never. I think it's terrible. There are places that do that, and good luck. That's great. There's a place for them, I'm sure, but that's not what we do. Everybody that is at Inclusive and participates in Inclusive is there because they work their asses off, and they are talented human beings. The end. And I hope that, moving forward, that people will realize that it's more than that. But that's also us having to help them to look beyond a visual disability, having to look beyond a speech impairment. This is that challenging people to look at the world differently. And I think that's part of our responsibility. But okay, so we have 2 minutes left. Any closing thoughts from you guys as we wrap up for tonight? 1 minute, actually. So you got the
I guess if nobody's going, I guess I'll give my closing thoughts. My closing thoughts, I don't know. It's just learn to be creative, I guess. Always explore your creative side, whether through acting, music, or whatever. So. And don't let other people try to stop you from being creative. So.
And anybody listening, come join us.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mighty Taco.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Mighty Taco. Sponsor us.
Thank you, Mighty Taco, for your spicy burritos. I love them.
Now I really want a taco.
Me too. Well, it is 9 o'clock-ish, so we are going to wrap it up on our end. We thank everybody who has stuck with us tonight. Join us next week as Matt Boyle will be here. He is a playwright. He's incredible, like a podcaster. Can't say enough great things about him. We'll be back next Saturday. And in the year of the virus, I don't even know what the date is anymore because it's every day is the same day. What is that, April 4th? Matt will be here 8 p.m., so please join us. Thank you for being here tonight. And if it's not tonight, thank you for listening. Any questions, comments, email inclusivetheaterofwesternNewYork@gmail.com or check out our website. Have a great night.